Victory is a dangerous thing. It makes men careless. It makes them believe the darkness has been conquered simply because the sun has risen. In the great hall of Heorot, the walls were still stained with the blood of the battle, but the air was filled with triumph. Grendel, the Shadow Walker, the eater of men, was dead. His arm, that massive, clawed limb that had ended so many lives, hung from the rafters like a trophy. A gruesome promise that the nightmare was finally over. The warriors drank. They boasted. They slept without their armor for the first time in 12 years. They believed the war was finished, but they forgot the oldest rule of nature. Nothing is born without a creator. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Grendel was a monster, yes, but he was also a son. And while the men of Heorot celebrated the death of a child, something else was waking up in the cold black water of the fens. Something older, something angrier. She came when the moon was highest. The poem gives her no name. It simply calls her Grendel's mother. But do not mistake this for humanity. In the ancient world, female monsters were often considered far more terrifying than males. They were the guardians of the bloodline, the avengers. She did not smash the doors down like her son. She was smaller, faster, and infinitely more precise. She slipped into the hall like a mist. The attack was not a brawl, it was an execution. She didn't want to kill everyone. She wanted balance. She wanted a life for a life. In the chaos, she seized Aesir, King Hrothgar's closest friend, his most trusted advisor. And then she did something that chilled the Danes to their bones. She didn't just take a hostage. She reached up to the rafters and ripped down Grendel's severed arm. She took back her son's body. And just as quickly as she arrived, she vanished into the night, taking the king's joy with her. Beowulf was not in the hall when she attacked. When he arrived at sunrise, he found Hrothgar broken, weeping not like a king, but like an old man. The war had not ended, it had simply changed location. Beowulf realized that waiting behind walls was no longer an option. To end this, they had to go to the source. They had to go to the mother's lair. The journey they took is one of the most atmospheric descriptions in all of literature. They traveled through wolf slopes and windy crags, tracking the trail of blood across the dying earth. Finally, they reached the place where Grendel was born. It wasn't just a swamp, it was a wound in the earth. A mere, a dark, stagnant lake surrounded by twisted trees covered in frost. The water was not blue. It was churning with blood and fire. The poem describes the water boiling with serpents. Sea dragons curled in the depths. It was a place where even hunted deer would rather face a pack of wolves than step into that water. It was a place where nature itself had gone wrong. Beowulf stood at the edge of the cliff, looking down into the abyss. He wasn't just looking at water, he was looking at an alien world. This is where Beowulf separates himself from every other warrior in history. Any man can fight a beast on land with solid ground beneath his feet. But Beowulf put on his armor, took a sword named Hrunting, a legendary blade lent to him, and jumped. He dove into the boiling water. The poem tells us it took him the better part of a day to reach the bottom. Think about that image, sinking deeper and deeper into the crushing darkness, the pressure building, the light from the surface fading until it is gone completely. Surrounded by sea beasts, nipping at his armor, swarming him like piranhas. It is a nightmare of suffocation. He was no longer the hunter. He was the bait. Finally, he hit the bottom, but he didn't drown. He was dragged into an underwater cave, an eye pocket beneath the earth, protected from the crushing water. A subterranean hall illuminated by a strange pale fire that burned without wood. And there, waiting for him, surrounded by the bones of centuries, was the mother. The fight was instant and brutal. Beowulf swung his sword, Hrunting, with all his strength. This was a weapon that had never failed. It struck the mother's head, and it bounced off. The steel sang, but the skin did not break. Man-made weapons were useless here. She was too ancient, too magical for human steel. She lunged. She grappled him to the ground. Beowulf, the strongest man on earth, was overpowered. She sat upon him, drawing a dagger, a blade meant to carve the life out of him. The great hero was seconds away from death. His armor held barely, but his strength was failing. He was in her world now, and in her world, he was nothing. But legends are not written by giving up. As he struggled, Beowulf's eyes caught a glint on the wall of the cave. Among the rusted armor of dead men, there hung a sword, but not a human sword. It was massive. The hilt was twisted with gold. The blade was etched with runes telling of the great flood that destroyed the giants of old. It was a weapon forged before humanity, a weapon made by monsters for killing monsters. With a scream of desperation, Beowulf threw the mother off. He leapt for the giant sword. It was so heavy that no ordinary man could lift it, but Beowulf swung it in a massive arc. The blade caught the mother in the neck. It didn't bounce. It sliced through bone and muscle like water. She fell. The ancient evil collapsed. And in that moment, a brilliant light filled the cave, as if the sun itself had decided to shine underground. The battle was won, but the horror wasn't over. Beowulf searched the cave and found the corpse of Grendel lying dead from his wounds. In a final act of closure, Beowulf cut off the monster's head to take back to Hrothgar. But the blood of the monsters was so toxic, so acidic, that the giant sword, the blade that had survived centuries, began to melt. It dissolved like ice, leaving only the hilt in Beowulf's hand. On the surface, the Danes had given up. They saw blood bubble up from the depths and assumed Beowulf was dead. They left. Only Beowulf's own men stayed, staring hopelessly at the water. But then the surface broke. Up from the nightmare swam the king of the Geats, carrying the heavy head of Grendel and the golden hilt of a melted sword. He had gone into the abyss, and he had returned. Beowulf returned to his homeland a legend. He was eventually crowned king. For 50 winters he ruled wisely. The land was peaceful. The monsters were gone. The people felt safe. But time is the one enemy no warrior can defeat. Beowulf grew old. His hair turned white. His strength began to fade. And while the old king sat on his throne believing the wars were over, something else was happening. Not in the water this time, but in the earth. Beneath a stone barrow, a thief stole a single golden cup from a forgotten treasure hoard. And in the darkness of the earth, a sleeping eye opened, a reptile eye. The water was conquered, but the fire was coming.